Imagine an ancient empire stretching further than any army could march. At its helm sits a figure known to scripture and history as Dhul-Qarnayn. He was a king granted extraordinary dominion, vast resources, and a divine mandate to travel to the extreme edges of the earth. The name Dhul-Qarnayn translates to the two-horned one. Because of his reputation as a just and righteous ruler rather than a bloodthirsty conqueror, many scholars and historians connect him to Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Persian Empire. Other traditions, however, point towards Alexander the Great. Ancient silver coins depicted Alexander's profile adorned with the horns of Ammon, offering a literal visual match for the legendary title. Regardless of his specific historical identity, Dhul-Qarnayn's legacy is defined by what he did with his power, a series of 3 strategic geographic expeditions that tested both his military might and his moral conviction. The first leg of his journey took him west. He mobilized his forces from the center of his empire and pushed outward, marching until he reached what would have appeared to be the absolute edge of the world. Standing on the shoreline, the ancient texts describe him watching the sun sink into a dark, murky spring. From his vantage point, looking out over a dark body of water, the sun appeared to literally sink into the waves. Here, at the geographical limits of his expedition, he encountered a local civilization. As a commander with immense military backing, he had the physical power to subjugate or destroy them. Instead, he established a strict code of justice. He would punish only those who were corrupt and oppressive, while treating the peaceful and righteous with generosity. By establishing this strict moral precedent at the visual edge of the world, he ensured that his authority was rooted in justice before he turned his attention toward the vulnerable populations of the East. Leaving the West, he completely reversed his trajectory. His forces embarked on a grueling cross-continental march toward the furthest reaches of the East, moving deep into Central Asia or early China. He marched until he reached what the texts call the rising place of the sun, the eastern geographical extreme of his expedition. In this arid region, he found a nomadic people living in a state of severe vulnerability. The landscape was harsh, rolling, and entirely barren. These communities had no natural geographic barriers or structural shelters to protect them from the elements. Having surveyed the dark waters of the west and the exposed plains of the east, Dhul-Qarnayn had accumulated a deep understanding of human vulnerability and harsh geography. He would need every bit of that knowledge for his final test. Instead of returning to his capital, the expedition pivoted. He charted a third distinct route, veering sharply off his east-west axis and heading directly north. This northern road led him straight into a formidable topographical barrier, a massive, towering chain of mountains. He pushed his way into a specific, narrow valley. It was nestled directly between 2 sheer, towering cliffs, a natural geological formation referred to as Satafain, or the 2 mountain barriers. The people encountered here spoke a language completely unintelligible to outsiders, a detail historical scholars link to the unique linguistic landscape south of the Caucasus. This is the home of the Georgian language, a pre-Indo-European isolate that has evolved locally for 5,000 years, entirely unrelated to any other language family in the known world. Dhul-Qarnayn stumbled upon a forgotten civilization, and they were trapped inside a highly strategic geological choke point. Through whatever translation they could manage, the locals made a desperate plea. They were being repeatedly raided and terrorized by a vicious force sweeping south through the gap in the mountains. They called these invaders Yajuj and Majuj, Gog and Magog. Historically, these names point to the highly destructive, nomadic tribes from the northern steppes, groups like the Scythians, Huns, or Khazars. The tribe offered to pay Dhul-Qarnayn a tribute if he would build a barrier to protect them. He refused their wealth. Instead, he asked for their physical labor, organizing them into a massive workforce. His engineering plan was audacious. He commanded them to gather massive blocks of iron and stack them tightly, leveling the space between the cliff faces. Then he ordered them to light a massive fire. Once the iron was heated to a glowing red-hot state, they poured molten copper and brass directly over the structure. The metals fused together, sealing every gap and creating a sheer, unclimbable dam. By combining advanced metallurgy with a natural geographic bottleneck, he forged a defensive fortification that the nomadic cavalry simply could not penetrate. Looking at this historical map of the region, we can pinpoint the real-world location of this legendary barrier, the Darial Gorge, nestled deep within the Caucasus Mountains. The Caucasus Range is a massive, continuous wall, stretching 1,200 kilometers, forming a near-perfect natural border between modern-day Georgia and southern Russia. The Darial Gorge is the only fatal gap in that armor. Historical records and the sheer physical topography of the Darial Pass align perfectly with the ancient accounts. It is a steep, incredibly narrow choke point, flanked by impenetrable stone. Modern satellite overlays like these confirm the exact V-shaped structure of the valley, proving it is an impassable region divided by a single, distinct gorge. After completing the Iron Barrier, Dhul-Qarnayn refused any personal glory. He warned the local people that even a wall of iron and copper is a temporary mercy, a structure that will eventually be leveled when the divine decree for the end of the world is fulfilled. The story of the two-horned king follows a path from the setting sun to a remote mountain gorge, leaving behind a legacy of strategic defense and absolute humility. While his engineering once defined the border of the known world, it stands as proof that even the most massive human efforts are ultimately finite.